Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. A 4-decade-long terror campaign that claimed over 40,000 lives. But is Turkey now entering a new chapter in its fight against the PKK? The terror group's so-called leadership, based in its Iraqi stronghold of Qandil, has announced that it will comply with imprisoned ringleader Abdullah Ocalans' call to disarm and dissolve. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan hailed this as a historic opportunity, coming months after his coalition partner, the Nationalist Movement Party, launched its terror-free Turkey initiative. Despite resistance and objections, Öcalan's statement was delivered by a delegation from the DEM Party, which has known ties to the PKK. While Iran and Germany have welcomed the move, the White House said dissolving the PKK could bring peace to a troubled region. Following the announcement, Erdogan warned Turkey would take action if the group fails to disband. In recent years, Ankara has intensified its military operations against the PKK, including cross-border campaigns in Iraq and Syria. According to Turkish media, the next steps in the process will depend on the PKK's response and could unfold in the coming months. For more, joining me now from Ankara is Ömer Özkızılcık. He's a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. From Washington, D.C., foreign policy analyst Rich Utsin, and from Doha, Ali Bakir, an assistant professor at Qatar University. Gentlemen, very sensitive topic for many, many Turks, but also something that has been a long time coming, as I personally perceive. Now, Ömer, I want to start with you. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 30 years old.
I'm 46, and as long as I can remember, there's always been the PKK. There's always been this threat to Turkish national security. Now, you're looking at this process, and I don't want to get into the politics first. I actually want to ask how you feel about this, because, I mean, I see the positives, I see the negatives. I want to embrace it. I'm kind of torn on it, and I want to hear your personal thoughts. Like, as a Turk, how do you feel about this process?
Yeah, putting the politics aside, I would say it's quite actually hard to digest that Abdullah Öcalan, who started all of this terror campaign against Turkey and who is responsible for the killings of thousands of Turkish citizens, including Turks and Kurds, is now the person who is calling for the end of the PKK and its terrorism efforts against Turkey. So on one side, I am quite angry that Abdullah Öcalan gets this platform and this role, but on the other side, I also want to be hopeful that this works out, because we suffered a lot from terrorism, and just the hope that terrorism will end someday is something that gives me emotions. But on the other side, it's like, yeah, these people were killing us. So it's very hard to judge this new reality.
It definitely is very hard to forgive, impossible to forget. Rich, Washington, when they saw the news break out that Abdullah Öcalan called for the disarmament and dissolution of the PKK, how was that received in D.C.?
Good to be with you, Yusuf, and thanks for having me on with this great panel. As you know, Washington is sort of seized with Ukraine and Gaza at the moment. So to be honest with you, this has barely made a ripple. It sometimes comes as a surprise to our friends in Turkey, but Americans don't pay that much attention to things that are going on in Turkey at the popular level. Now, I will say it caught the attention of the White House, who immediately put out a statement cautiously optimistic and saying that this was a good sign and could lead to a diminution of the tensions between the U.S. and Turkey and northeast Syria. That's positive. And among those who follow Turkish affairs more closely, the Washington foreign policy elites and so forth, I think this has been well received. Obviously, this is not entirely a surprise either. This has been a process that was carefully choreographed, a couple of false starts, and in some sense, by the Washington commentariat, long anticipated. So it's cautiously optimistic, both at the official and sort of in the think tank level in Washington.
Ali, I want to ask country by country, and to you, I want to ask, how is Iran looking at this? Because this is a proxy that Iran has had problems with in the past, but it also has used to its benefit in the past as well. So is this a positive or a negative for Tehran? What do you expect going forward if there is a dissolution of this group?
Thank you very much, Yusuf, for hosting me. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and it's a great panel. When it comes to Iran, historically, besides the Syrian regime of Assad, Iran has been a primary supporter for the PKK in the region, and this was during the Shah period and also during the Islamic Iran regime period. The PKK was used against Iraq and Turkey mainly to undermine the social and security dynamics of these countries and to have leverage over them. And this also support persisted during different times, including lately, where the Iranians have been mulling the possibility of banking on or supporting the YPG branch of PKK in Syria to compensate the fall of Assad. So no doubt the dissolution of PKK would definitely deprive Iran from a proxy to be used in its regional agenda. How it will affect the Kurds in Iran, I'm not sure, because the Iranian regime is also, as you know, a closed regime. Minorities under this regime suffers a lot, whether they ethnically or religiously, Kurds, Arab, Sunnis, and others. So from this perspective, I wouldn't say that there would be a change, but from the security perspective, yes, the Iranians would lose. And that's why they might have an interest in not allowing this to happen. So we will have to wait and see how things will evolve eventually after Abdullah Ocalans called to dissolve the terror group in Turkey and in the region.
Umar, Ali already touched on the YPG a little, the Syrian affiliate of the PKK. Probably the affiliate that's caused Turkey the most problems over the past decade. How do you see this call to dissolve impacting Syria, impacting the YPG, impacting Turkey's calculations on its southern border?
Yeah, when we look toward the situation has changed a lot since the fall of the Assad regime. And now there are negotiations between Damascus and the YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. And there was a coordinated offer by Ankara and Damascus, which basically says to the SDF, disarm, disintegrate, hand over all Arab areas and the oil fields, and become a political party in Syria and engage in politics legally within the Syrian framework. So far, the SDF has not accepted this offer, but we know that there are some within the SDF who advocate for an agreement with Damascus, and they were so far pushed aside by Qandil. Even according to my sources in Damascus when I was there, the speech was that there was actually an agreement between Ahmed Ashara and Mazlum Abdi, the head of the Syrian Democratic Forces, but after Mazlum Abdi received a call from the Qandil mountains and the Qandil leadership, he withdrew from the agreement. So with this call, now the opportunity to reach an agreement with Damascus is much higher, and its hand has been more open. However, we have yet to see how they will react, because Mazlum Abdi's first reaction was that this call does not bother them and does not include them. However, the politicians, the Kurdish Turkish politicians who met with Abdullah Ocalans and who provided this message to the public said that Abdullah Ocalans also meant the YPG in Syria, and that they may visit the YPG soon in Syria to send them this message that they also have to disarm and disband. So all fingers crossed, we have yet to see how the PKK and its Syrian branch will react.
Rich, few Americans know Syria as well as you do. When you look at this statement, you look at how the YPG originally received it. Does this weaken the YPG going forward? What options do the YPG have? Because, I mean, when we look at the broader picture, the PKK has already basically lost any of its operational capability inside Turkey. They're an outlawed group in Iraq, and things aren't looking too good for them in Syria as well. And this probably has translated negatively for the YPG, hasn't it?
Well, certainly the structural components of the YPG's position and the political arm, the PYD, in Syria have been weakened. I don't think they've been weakened because of the Ocalans statement. In fact, I think that's confusing cause and effect. I think Ocalan's statement is a reflection, in part, of the fact that the broader PKK movement wants to protect what it sees as its primary accomplishment over the last 20 or 30 years, which is to get some territorial control in northeast Syria. Now, I think the YPG had visions of something more permanent, bigger, more autonomous, and clearly the fall of Assad, the advent of the second Trump administration, the administration's desire to withdraw U.S. troops, and the clear legitimacy project, I guess, that's being pursued by the new authorities in Damascus, who are trying very hard to reach out to the Kurds of the Northeast, as well as the other people, and keep a unified Syria. All these dynamics show that the sort of the shelf life of an autonomy project based on the YPG model in Syria is approaching fast. So to an extent, I think that they know this. The Syrian Kurds that are in the YPG know this. Of course, I don't want to imply that all the Kurds of Syria support the YPG. There are independents. There are sort of KDP-aligned Kurds as well. Most of them don't see that this the casus belli for the United States, which is the presence of the Islamic State, is as pressing as it once was. Certainly, there's things that need to be coordinated among the new Syrian government and its neighbors, and the people out in northeast Syria as well. But doing that on this model of a massively, heavily armed group with a constant U.S. subsidy, that's clearly not going to last very much longer. That was one of the rationales, I think, that supported the reopening of negotiations. And in that sense, I think it's a reality that the YPG position has been weakened, but probably to its own benefit. I think in the end, the Kurds are going to find a place in the new Syrian government, and there's probably going to be more, certainly going to be more political rights, stability and security than there was before this whole thing unfolded with the Syrian civil war. So it's going to be a net win, but it does involve a decrement in the ground strength and the political dominance that group has in the Northeast right now.
Ali, I want to ask you about Iraq because obviously PKK, the stronghold in Qandil Mountains, how is this decision, if it's implemented, going to impact Iraq and also especially the KRG, the northern region?
Let me first highlight one point, Yusuf. I think that Ocalan's statement about dissolving the terror group is a reflection of the weakness of this group. The PKK is now at its weakest position since its establishment more than 50 years ago, and also the status of its affiliates, regional affiliates, suffers the same situation. So I think they are not in a good position to sustain their terror campaign. So in order to avoid the ultimate fate, they would like to probably utilize the situation to gain some political, stakes. I think that many regional players are open to this scenario. However, some PKK affiliates are resisting the dissolution call because they are still hoping that other countries might jump in and help them to sustain, such as Iran, Israel, or maybe the US or some European countries. And I'm talking particularly about the YPG. But regardless, I see that they are in a very critical situation. When it comes to the Iraqi situation, for so long, the PKK has been undermining the Turkish-Iraqi relations, and I think that dissolving the PKK would shift the situation strategically. I think that it will boost the diplomatic, economic, and strategic ties with Iraq, and with the PKK dissolution, I think a big obstacle will be removed from improving the ties strategically. Having said this, I think that we should be always cautious about these estimations, and we should also be ready for the emergence of other types of threats. Maybe other groups will jump in to fill the vacuum, especially pro-Iran Shiite militias, or maybe the Iranians would encourage the creation of other terror groups from the Kurdish pool of the PKK. So we have to be cautious. We are optimistic, but again, there are a lot to be done in order to move forward with the Abdullah Ocalan call to dissolve the terror group.
I want to take a little of Ali's answer and pose it to you as a question, Omar. He said that this was a decision taken from a position of weakness. How much, when you try to imagine what Ocalan's decision-making process was, How much of this was the initiative by the Nationalist Party? How much of this was Öcalan saying, you know what, it's time to dissolve? And how much of it was him looking at the geopolitical chessboard and seeing, well, things aren't going good in Iraq, things aren't going good in Syria, they're not going good in Turkey, it's time to end this?
So let's make a clear distinction. When Turkey initially tried the peace process, it was an attempt of a negotiated settlement. But we don't see a similar situation now. What we see now is more a government victory if it happens. So this is clearly the result of the Turkish counterterrorism efforts majority. So in 2015, the PKK was fighting an urban warfare in Turkish cities in the southeast of Turkey. And now the PKK has lost its guerrilla warfare capabilities in Turkey. It has lost all of the Iraqi-Turkish border region to infiltrate into Turkey. The presence of the PKK in the western side of the Euphrates River has been lost. There's no more Russia to protect the PKK Syrian branch. The Iranians are no longer in Syria. The Assad regime is no longer there to make an agreement with the YPG. And as well, the Trump administration will likely withdraw from Syria. So all of these coming together just shows one thing. The PKK cannot survive this. The PKK is in a very weak situation now. And inside this weak situation, the Turkish Nationalist Party leader, Devlet Bahçeli, as well as the Turkish president, gave the PKK an offer to disband themselves and not to be eradicated militarily by the Turkish side. So this is basically an offer for them to have a dignified way out in which Turkey does not have to eliminate the PKK altogether in a military way, because Turkey believes if this is not negotiated and this is the disbanding by the side of the PKK fully, that this will facilitate Turkish democracy and Turkish sovereignty as well as Turkish prosperity and will be a big gain for Turkish security.
Mm-hmm. Rich, I want to talk about a potential problem on the horizon. Let's say all goes well and the PKK does dissolve. Now, you're going to have a bunch of people who know nothing but terrorism, nothing but fighting, probably still with some weapons, all of a sudden unemployed, all of a sudden without an aim. Now, we've seen post-Iraq what has happened in that type of situation. Generally, this type of military-age men that have no aim, no skills, tough to integrate to society, that has bad consequences. What do you think is the proper step forward with these people afterwards, let's say after that dissolution process? What could Turkey do? What could Syria do? What could Iraq do to ensure there's no splinter groups?
Right. Well, that is a real threat, as you are probably familiar in the case of the Irish Republican Army. Even after the accords were signed in the late 90s, ending the IRA and the provisional IRA's campaign against the United Kingdom, there was this real IRA phenomenon where you had some sort of dead-enders, radicals who refused to participate in the peace process. That will continue to be a problem. There may be some splinter groups like that. But the center of mass, if you will, for a solution in this kind of situation, because, by the way, this is a good problem to have. Terror campaigns don't usually end with the death of all the terrorists. It ends when there's a political solution, a way out. But you do have these people who have been radicalized, who have been inclined and trained to participate in violent acts. You cannot just let them loose. There has to be what's called a DDR process, demobilization, disarming and reintegration. There's different elements to that, but the bottom line is they have to be given a dignified path forward to participate in society, and so that may involve some re-education. It may involve job training, and certainly that there has to be a concerted effort by the government of Turkey and also other Kurdish groups, local groups in the areas where these people might be returning, and not just in Turkey, because remember the PKK is a transnational phenomenon. So there'll be Iraqi Kurds, there'll be Iranian Kurds, Syrian Kurds. There's going to have to be a DDR process in each of these countries to make sure that this pool of young, violent, not just men either, men and women, don't put those skills, so to speak, to violent use as criminals or as splinter groups.
Mm-hmm. Ali, I want to ask you, which group, country, element concerns you the most as playing spoiler to this, what's a very sensitive process?
So let me also highlight that even if the call of Abdullah Ocalans is the result of the victory of the government in Turkey, I think that we should not frame it like this or promote it like this in order to facilitate the implementation of his call. Also, we should be sensitive about how this poll should be reflected to the public and move forward with it. And also, I think that you are definitely right about what we should do about the next step. And I think that opening the political atmosphere for more participation and focusing on developing the regional areas where these elements reside, I think it will absorb a lot of them and help integrate them into the regional system, whether in Iraq, whether in Turkey, whether in Syria. And I think that Syria is playing a central role in this issue. Now, when it comes to those who are most probably not comfortable to his call, or I think they would lose a lot if the PKK is dismantled. We have Israel and we have Iran when it comes to the regional actors, and both of them have been publicly lately stressing on the need to support actually the YPG, the PKK branch in Syria, under the guise of supporting the Kurdish minority in Syria. And I think that dissolving the PKK would definitely prevent them from a tool that would typically help them to push their expansive regional agenda, and that would be not good for their policies. That's why we should be cautious about what these countries are planning or trying to do at the current. We should monitor them, and we should prepare counter measures also, because it's very important not only to focus on what the PKK is doing, but on those who are supporting and helping the PKK to sustain, because these need to be addressed to and answered.
Omar, aside from separatist activities or the terrorism that the PKK partakes in, they have a robust narcotics trade, human trafficking. This generates a lot of income, a lot of money. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. And this is according to Europol, Interpol. Big problem in Europe, big problem in Turkey, big problem throughout the Middle East. Now, if the terror group shuts down, does the PKK morph into a cartel? What happens to it? Because somebody's going to take over these activities. Nobody's going to just push aside billions and billions of dollars. How is that dealt with?
First of all, we have to understand that drug trafficking has been a major source of financing PKK's terrorism activities. So the motivation here was not only to gain money and to make financial benefits out of this, but to finance a terror campaign against Turkey. So with the PKK, if it dissolves, we have yet to see, the need for this drug trafficking would be reduced. However, we should not expect that the drug smuggling altogether will be banished and abolished. So what can happen is that remnants of the other elements in the northern region of Iraq or some actors may continue with the smuggling. But this level of drug smuggling will be something much more different than what Turkey has used to in fighting against drug smuggling and narco-terrorism. So this drug smuggling will be, as you said, more of a cartel issue than a terrorism issue. And lastly, we have also to say that the PKK not only facilitated the drug smuggling, but actually accelerated it, increased it in scale, because it wanted to make the more money than it can do. So for this to work out as efficiently as it did, the PKK is needed. Without the PKK as a structure, the drug smuggling issue will also be lowered to a more a way that is more amendable and that's more dealable from the Turkish perspective. So I do not think that the drug smuggling will stop altogether, but it will be reduced very much if the PKK dissolves itself.
Rich, it seems like we're talking about what happens if the group dissolves, disarms, this, that. What happens if everything falls apart?
Well, I hate to say it, but pessimism is seldom disappointed in this region, right? So there's reason to be skeptical. I think Ankara has been taking the right stance, which is like, now is the time to solve this through political means. However, until that disarmament takes place, we're going to continue operations, and we are going to stand ready to pursue the kinetic part of the solution. Look, no terror movement was ever defeated just through kinetic means, but very few of them have been defeated without sufficient kinetic means. And Turkey, in the last 10 to 15 years, has dramatically increased its surveillance capabilities, its lethality, operational planning, its understanding of where the money flows are and the human flows and the operational places. So I think, unfortunately, if it does fall apart, we'll see more of the same. We'll see a PKK enterprise that's on the back foot, and because of the dynamics we've already discussed in each of these countries, in Syria, in Iraq, and in Turkiye.
Ömer, Rich, Ali, thanks for joining me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.